and send it over. So yeah, thank you so much for joining. This is, we've got a mix of advisors and clients on here, which is awesome. So I'm going to talk about Egypt, and I'm going to start out from kind of why I decided to go to Egypt all the way through the trip. And I'd like to keep it to under an hour because I know we've got people calling in from Europe and people who need to make dinner for kids. So we'll just jump right in, and it's recorded, and I'll share this with all of you afterwards. So I guess the reason I decided to go to Egypt was because I had been thinking about traveling for quite some time. I'd been thinking about going away for my birthday in August. I had been thinking about going in somewhere in September and then October, but Egypt hadn't really crossed my mind until my friend mentioned that she was planning to go to Egypt with her family. And I have always liked Egypt. I studied the temples and the tombs in school and college. I'd always found them fascinating and thought, well, this sounds like a good idea. I knew that a lot of African countries had started opening to American citizens with COVID tests and everything. So started looking into it, not in a lot of detail. And I reached out to Ashish Singrajka, who's the president of Big Five Tours and Expeditions, Largay preferred supplier and Virtuosa preferred supplier, and said, what's it going to take? In the end, it actually turned into what we call a FAM trip, familiarization trip. So Ashish planned all of this for us, including the hotels, all of the sites, and it was very fast paced. It's definitely not the way I'd go back and do it. I would certainly take a little more time instead of, doing all of Luxor in one day. I would space that out over 2 days because it was very fast paced and it was very hot and it was very tiring. However, we worked with the time we had. And in the end, I was in Egypt for 7 nights. The whole trip itself was about 9 days because I left on Monday the 9th and I came back late on Wednesday the 18th. It's a red-eye flight out of Egypt to come home. So I booked my flights very spontaneously. I booked them through the Largay Travel Air Department, and I'm also a Delta Silver Medallion member. So everything connected to my frequent flyer number, my email, global entry information. So I was getting emails from Delta regarding the trip and what I needed to know. My flight into Cairo, though, from Paris was operated by Air France. So when I clicked on destination information in the emails received from Delta, and I got a lot of emails from Delta regarding their updated COVID protocols, their updated care standards, what I could expect at the airports, what I could expect in the lounge. It didn't have information about Egypt because Delta doesn't fly into Cairo, Air France does. So all of the information that I got from regarding the arrivals and the COVID procedures in Egypt came from the US Embassy, the State Department, what's found on the Air France website, and then what Big Five was able to give me. So we'll start with the COVID because I think that is clearly the elephant in the room. What's it like to travel with COVID? Oh, by the way, if you guys have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And if they're relevant to what we're talking about, I'll jump on it. Otherwise, we'll address them at the end. So COVID testing. I did several tests. Egypt does require a negative COVID test within 96 to 72 hours of your departure to Cairo. When I first saw this, and when I first saw that flights from North America, Paris, London Heathrow, Frankfurt, there's a few other countries and places on the list, I said, great, I'm from North America, 96 hours from my flight out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That's not accurate. It is 96 hours from your flight from Paris. For me, this was something I should have looked at early on, maybe around booking my flight, because my flight out of Paris was 25 hours after my flight from home, which really left me over a weekend trying to find a place to get a COVID test and get results back. I called a lot of places in the area. Nobody would guarantee me results in 72 hours. I called places as far as down near DC. Again, same problems. Nobody was going to require, would guarantee the results back. I finally found a place in Hagerstown, Maryland. It's about 20 minutes from me. And I went down there Friday afternoon. That was probably the 94-hour mark that I got that test, which was cutting it really close. I went again on Saturday morning and had my results by Sunday afternoon. I also waited in a 2 to 3 hour drive-through line for both tests. This probably had to do with the fact that I was getting tested right after the election, and a lot of people who went to vote in person also went to get tested. I knew I needed to do it. I did it, but in hindsight, and then looking forward at booking for clients or potentially going back, I'm not traveling on a Monday or a Tuesday. I'm traveling on Thursday or Friday so that I can get that test on Monday and know that the lab is open through that week and that I can, fingers crossed, get results in time for my first flight. Egypt requires that the test results are printed. This was another, I don't want to say hurdle, but it kind of was, because this was what came through on the online portal. It does have my chart and my name at the top of it, but otherwise there's no lab information, there's no doctor information, there's nothing. This 2 pages is what I was able to pick up from the medical records office on Monday morning at 9:30 in the morning before turning around and driving an hour and a half to the airport. That's what I showed to the health officials that were waiting for me off the flight in Cairo. And I don't think I would have gotten away with the other one. It had time and date, but very, very small print, and definitely felt much more comfortable with the actual medical records from the test. I will say that others are likely going to have different experiences based on where you are. I know for people that are near New York, people that are in LA or Chicago, getting a test for travel purposes is very easy. And I would say it also probably depends on if you've got private labs near you, which I know some people do. There's also mail-in tests, and I did one of those as a backup, just in case, because I knew I'd have the results within 24 hours. All of that is what Egypt requires for the arrival. Egypt also requires, obviously, a valid passport, and they require a visa. The visa is $25 US, and it can be done on arrival at Cairo Airport or Alexandria or Sharm el Sheikh or one of the other international gateways. Big Five, who I traveled with, and most likely other tour operators will provide a meet and greet service, which is where someone will meet you off the jet bridge, take you through immigration, have the visa in hand already. You'll put it in your passport and you'll go straight through immigration. Very easy. Big Five's meet and greet did meet me past the health table. So when I stopped at the health table and gave my negative COVID result, the health form that they've asked me to fill out, and where they took my temperature, I didn't have any ground representative there. They were after that. But it was very nice and very easy to have that. Passports need to be valid for 6 months past your return date. Our group did run into a snag with this, with Ashish not being able to board in Fort Lauderdale because his passport was 6 months and a couple of days from expiry past his return date. So I think from now on, I'm going to tell all clients that passports need to be valid for 7 months past your return date, just in case. The actual traveling, from my perspective, and if anyone has traveled, I know we've got a couple people on the call here who have traveled far from home over the summer and the fall. You know, I think everyone's experience is different. I opted for business class. I deemed it more space and probably fewer people in the cabin than in premium economy or economy. It was also overnight flights, both directions, and I really wanted to sleep. Um, so that meant I had lounge access. Uh, that meant that I had priority boarding. I already have TSA pre-check and global entry. So add more people. So the actual traveling for me didn't seem exceptionally different, except for the fact that I had to wear a mask. Um, the the Sky Club in Atlanta, they had seats blocked off. The Air France lounge in Paris had seats blocked off, um, and most were reasonably empty. The Air France lounge was definitely busier, but I would say that most people were very respectful of space. And if they were not your traveling companion, they weren't sitting near you. Um, I did notice a difference in terms of obviously food service and food preparation in both lounges. Um, Atlanta's Sky Club Lounge in Terminal F has all prepackaged sandwiches, all prepackaged um, everything is prepackaged. But they do have a bartender working who will pour your drink for you. And they've put up plexiglass around that bar. In France, this was Terminal K that I was at. They had their buffet of food was open and they had someone back there who was serving you what you wanted. Not great for me because I don't speak French, so I was just pointing at things. But the bar was self-service. The showers at the Sky Club in Atlanta were closed. The showers in the Air France lounge were open. I will also say that the service on both airlines was slightly different. Air France was doing coursed meals where they would take your appetizer and bring your main course, and they were serving all of their drinks in glassware. Delta was doing one tray that had your full meal on it, and they had their drinks in plastic cups. I'm not sure. I'm going to speculate that this has to do with US versus EU regulations, but I'm not positive. I was kind of surprised that Delta's business class was not offering at least a drink, champagne in a glass. Both airlines, normally when you come on board, you'll get a glass of champagne. They were not doing that. That was after takeoff. So they were definitely minimizing the touch points that you needed to interact with a flight attendant. But still, I felt that the service was, high Delta and high Air France level that you would expect. And then being in the airports for me I felt normal. I mean, I fly out of a small airport anyway. The Starbucks was open, the Subway was open, the Dunkin' Donuts was open. Terminal D in Atlanta, where I landed from my domestic flight, everything was open. All the food places were open. There were a lot of people. I walked to Terminal F because I had a lot of time. And I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but you go down to the train level, you go over to Terminal E, you go back up, and you actually walk through Terminal E before going back down and under the tunnel through to F. Terminal E was much quieter. A lot of places were closed in Terminal E, but I think in general, Atlanta doesn't use Terminal E a ton. Over in Terminal F, the food court with the fast food was open, and the Hudson News shops were open. But the restaurants that they have over there and the shops themselves, most of those were closed. And then in Paris, most of the shops were closed. Not all, but most. That could have also been, though, the time that I arrived, that it was the morning. So I, for me, I felt perfectly comfortable flying. I felt that the airlines and the airports were doing a lot to make sure that there was hand sanitizer and, that people were wearing masks and people were social distancing. Um, but it definitely felt safe to me, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Um, I've talked about arrival in Cairo. We'll touch briefly on the hotels and the safety and security of Egypt because I think that's important for one, and everyone's going to want to know what hotels are doing as well for COVID purposes. Um, I stayed at 3 hotels. I stayed at the Four Seasons First Residence, which is in Giza. That was on my very first night, and then on my last 2 nights. And then in Luxor, we were at the Sofitel Winter Palace. And then in Aswan, we were at the Sofitel Legend Old Cataract. The Four Seasons and the Sofitel Legend in Aswan are both Virtuoso properties. And so as a result, um, we were able to see, other rooms. We took a site tour. I also had the chance to visit the Four Seasons Nile Plaza, which is on the Cairo side of the Nile River. This was my first trip to the Middle East, but I've been to Istanbul before. And one thing that I knew from Istanbul and expected was that anytime we entered a building, we went through security. And not just a metal detector, but a full bag security. So, for example, arriving to the Four Seasons on my first night, first of all, they have a gate for their valet or for their drive up at their entrance so that somebody just can't pull off the street and park next to the hotel. They had a dog that walked around the car before it was admitted to actually in front of the hotel. They had a metal detector and an x-ray machine for any bag that came in. In addition, my luggage, my little rolly luggage, was sanitized and sprayed before they brought it to my room. At the Winter Palace in Luxor, we also went through a metal detector, and at the Old Cataract in Aswan, a metal detector and a bag x-ray. And at all 3 of these places, they also took our temperatures and had hand sanitizer for us to use, and they asked us to use it before entering. All staff had on masks. And again, at the desks, plastic things up, very spaced out. It seemed like in the restaurants as well, they had moved tables around so that no party was right on top of another party. At the airports, also to enter an airport in most of the Middle East, I'm going to speculate, you actually need to go through a metal detector and a bag x-ray just to get into the airport. I've done that in Istanbul and I've done it in Kathmandu, and now I've done it in Cairo and Aswan. The only reason that I stayed overnight at the Four Seasons so far from the airport on my first night was because I was meeting the rest of the group. They came in early and they did Cairo before me. We met in Cairo, but we turned around and flew immediately to Luxor. In terms of how that itinerary worked out for me, I did Cairo at the end of my trip, and as a result, spent a lot of time trying to catch up in Luxor when our Egyptologist was talking about cartouches and certain hieroglyphs, because everyone else had already done the Egyptian Museum and had a better sense of that already. So when I'm planning a trip for a client, a friend, family, whoever wants to go to Egypt, because I'll totally help you, I would say start in Cairo, do the ancient Cairo stuff with Dashur, Saqqara, Giza, Memphis, the Egyptian Museum, and get that framework. And then go down to Luxor and Aswan and see everything else. Luxor holds, I want to say 1/3 or something of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. I mean, it is literally the entire west bank of the Nile down in Luxor is an archaeological site. It's absolutely stunning. We flew immediately there and we jumped right in. The flights to Luxor and then the flight from Aswan back to Cairo were with Egypt Air, and they are not social distancing on those planes. They were packed. Masks were required. The crew had on the face shields, and they also had on those like Tyvek suits, as well as masks and goggles. Most people on the plane were wearing a mask, but some of them had it under their nose. They were handing out water bottles. So of course, you take off your mask when you're taking a drink. So a lot of people were just very slowly sipping the water. These flights are only an hour though. It's an hour down to Luxor, and it's about an hour and 20 minutes from Aswan back to Cairo. Okay. I'm going to talk about the itinerary now. Are there any questions? I'll wait a second to see if anyone's typing any questions. All right. So we'll start with the itinerary. We'll start how I did this, which was Luxor first. Again, like I said earlier, 7 nights was definitely not enough time. I felt very rushed. I didn't work on the itinerary. Had I worked on the itinerary, I might have tried to change my flights, but I didn't. And again, it was the most amazing trip. I think anyone who's seen my Facebook posts or my Instagram stories will know that I've been like totally head over heels for this trip since I got back. But again, I would start in Cairo for a couple of nights, do everything else, go back to Cairo, definitely make it a lot more leisurely than it was. We had no time to enjoy the pool at the hotel, which the pool at the Old Cataract Aswan is gorgeous. The entire hotel is stunning. Of course, the Four Seasons, beautiful. Spa-wise, they are open. They're kind of, sort of. But if this was normal time, I would want time to enjoy the spa at the Four Seasons or the spa at the Sofitel. And after walking the pyramids and the tombs and the temples, you really want that spa service. So I would give myself a lot more time in Egypt next time. We also missed a lot of Egypt. We didn't do Alexandria. We didn't get to the Red Sea, Sharm el Sheikh. We didn't go to Abu Simbel. We missed a couple of the sites around Luxor. We did as much as we could pack into that trip, but there's so much more to see. So we'll start with Luxor. We arrived in Luxor. We went to the hotel and checked in, and then we did slightly modify the itinerary as Big Five had given it to us. Instead of doing the museum that night, we did the museum the following night because like museums here in the States, they'll do like one night, they're open till 9 or 10 p.m. So on our first night in Luxor, we did the Temple of Karnak, which is the largest temple in the world. And we did the Temple of Luxor. Temple of Karnak is like my dream temple. It is absolutely fantastic. This is where the Grand Hypostyle Hall is. Most Egyptian temples have a hypostyle hall, but it might be a row or two of columns. I'm talking massive, massive columns. The Grand Hypostyle Hall at Karnak is 6 rows of columns that are, 6 columns deep. It is huge. And because there was hardly anyone else there, I could wander around the column. I took pictures where I'm looking at the top and the columns, and there's not a single person in my picture. We did see a few other people, but by far the fewest people that I saw was in the Luxor area. We did the Temple of Luxor by night. This is lit up. It's absolutely spectacular. It's right in the city of Luxor too. So you walk in and you have an old church at the entrance of the temple that was turned into a mosque. It's right there. It's actually within the temple walls itself. You can see later on Roman parts where they walled something off and they put up frescoes and, turned it into their own church. but it's sunk into the ground. So above you, you've got street level that you can see the cars and the tuk-tuks going by and the guys on the street selling, street food or whatever. Magical, absolutely magical. The following morning is where we started with the Valley of the Kings. We left fairly early and we took a boat ride across the Nile and met our van on the other side. Probably this cut off an hour of driving time because we would have had to go up and over and back. And traffic in Egypt is, I think, worse than New York. I'm not positive. I haven't been to New York in a few months, but it was pretty bad. So we took a 5 to 10 minute boat ride across, met our van, and off we went. The Valley of the Kings, the Ramesseum, all of these sites on the west bank of the Nile are within sight of Luxor. Actually, from the Temple of Luxor that night, actually from our hotel balconies across the Nile, we could see the light show at Queen Hatshepsut's mortuary temple. So these are not far out in the desert, an hour's drive winding through sand dunes and things. They are within sight of Luxor. So we started with Valley of the Kings. I've got video somewhere of us pulling up to this vast parking lot that is literally empty, absolutely empty. We were early in just the way that things work. The guys from the market already knew we were there and they were gathering to try to get us to buy stuff as we walked into the Valley of the Kings. We did stop on our way out, but you kind of walk through this tunnel of probably 25 to 30 shops selling scarves and shirts and alabaster carvings. And, you could buy yourself a Pepsi or a Coke there if you were thirsty. So we walked through that. We got to the other side and we boarded this little trolley train to drive us up to the entrance. There was us four, our guide, and our police bodyguard. I'll talk about him later. They were all very, very nice. And then there was 2 solo travelers that each had their own guide. And that was it. That was absolutely it. So you get up there. It's probably a 3-minute drive. It's just up the hill, takes you further into the valley. And you're just right there. King Tut's tomb is 100 feet that way. And it does kind of wind up, and there's a lot of tombs along the way. Some of them require an extra ticket. So King Tut's tomb is a separate ticket, and Nefertiti, it's either Nefertiti or Nefertari, their tomb is also an extra ticket. We went into King Tut's tomb first. I almost don't have words for this because in a normal pre-pandemic, probably pre-revolution era, there'd be a line of people outside waiting to go in. There's no skip the line. So, you can't buy a skip the line ticket for King Tut's tomb. You buy the one ticket and you wait in that line. 10 people are allowed inside King Tut's tomb at any time. And the 4 of us walked right in. Nobody was pushing us around. Nobody was trying to get us to leave quicker so that 4 more people could come in. We took pictures of this and we took pictures of that and this and that. The guide that came down with us, watchman, I guess maybe, the guides the Egyptologists are not allowed in the tombs with you or the pyramids or anything else. So who comes down with you to make sure that you're following the rules that they have set up is just a watchman who sits at the entrance. They want a little, bakshish money for their taking pictures, but this guy took our cameras. He went down next to the sarcophagus and walked around it and took pictures of all of the amazing paintings that are there. He he climbed into where King Tut's mummy is, and he held my phone over. So I have a top view of King Tut's face. There is plexiglass in between there, but so there's a little bit of a reflection, but that's pretty cool. We spent 20 minutes down there. Nobody rushed us out. It was quiet because we were quiet. It was absolutely surreal. We went into a few other tombs. Again, we were the only people in there, except at our last one. We went into this beautiful, beautiful tomb, and some of them are much larger than others. We went all the way down. We're taking all our pictures. And as we're coming out, we saw probably 40 people walking towards us. I've got a video somewhere of this as well on my phone, just to show you the difference in sound, because we were quiet. There were 4 women. We were talking and taking pictures, but there was no reverberating echo. The minute 40 people walked into that, I thought I was in the middle of a city. It was so loud. And that's what it would be on a daily basis in a normal tourism time. I saw a stat somewhere before I traveled that said 4,000 people go to the Temple of Karnak on any given day in a normal tourism period. 4,000 people. We saw, I want to say like 10, maybe 20. There was another small group of students with us or near us. Compare that to someplace like the Louvre or the Eiffel Tower or Disney World, where you're getting tens of thousands of people on a normal day. And the amount of people who go to Egypt, or the lack of people who go to Egypt, is absolutely staggering. I couldn't believe that number when I read it. After the Valley of the Kings, we went and we did the Ramesseum, we did the mortuary temple of Queen Hatshepsut, we did another Ramses temple. There's a bunch of Ramses. There's, I think, 9 or 10 of them. And they have tombs and temples and mortuary temples and all of that. We saw the Colossi of Memnon on our way back out. But that was all of the Valley of the Kings. This is the day that I would split up into 2 days. It was a lot, and we didn't see everything. There's a temple north of Luxor called Dendara. We didn't have time. There's Abu Simbel outside of Aswan. It's a 3-hour drive one way, but we definitely didn't have time for that. So I would split Luxor into 2 days, give myself time to relax and enjoy the city, enjoy food. There's the market in Luxor. We didn't go to that. And then what we did, and what would make a lot of sense for someone who doesn't have time for a river cruise, would be to drive between Luxor and Aswan. It's about 5 to 6 hours. There's 2 stops along the way. There's the Temple of Edfu, and there's the Temple of Kamambo. For people who have 3 to 4 nights and want to do a river cruise from Luxor to Aswan, you absolutely can, and you see a lot more, but you'll do Edfu and Kamambo as well. There's also the chance to take a cruise on Lake Nasser outside of Aswan. And again, no time for that. They're 3 to 4 nights as well. Leaving Luxor, you're on these small roads. There's donkeys and there's cows and there's trucks. But again, at Edfu, we were some of the only people. I think 3 or 4 people came in after us. And at Kamambo, we saw 2 other people. That's it. Kamambo is also dedicated to the crocodile god. So there's a small crocodile museum there, and they have mummified crocodiles. It's right on the bend of the Nile River where, and this is what I was told from our Egyptologist, the bend in the river is a natural slowdown of the Nile as it's heading north. So crocodiles like to hang out where there is very slow moving water. So this was the perfect spot for the crocodiles to hang out. And this is why they built the temple there, because the ancient Egyptians built a temple to things that they wanted to pray to and also things that they feared, because if they prayed to the things they feared, that god would keep them safe. So there's a temple to the crocodile god here. This is another stop where a river cruise would be. There's a lot of markets along the Nile River there. They were all closed. All of the little cafes that are right there, they were closed. It's about an hour from there down into Aswan. We did get into Aswan after dark that evening. Sunset was around 5-ish at night. I had actually been expecting it to be earlier, or I'm sorry, later. I don't know why I thought that. I guess I just figured it's further south Egypt is. So I was expecting sunset to be more like 6 or maybe even 7, but it was actually a lot earlier than that. So we got in late that night, went straight to the hotel. Believe we actually went out to the market that evening, but I can't remember the order of that. We went to one market, and that was the Aswan market. The following morning, we started in Aswan, and we saw the Nasser High Dam, or the Aswan High Dam, which was constructed by Nasser in the 60s. And this is what dammed up the Nile to minimize the impacts of the annual Nile floods. But it also threatened a lot of archaeological sites south of the dam, in the Nubian Desert, which is the stretch of desert between Egypt and Sudan. One of those sites is Abu Simbel. This is spectacular. It's one of the places we didn't go. Like I said, it's a 3-hour one-way drive to Abu Simbel. In a normal year, again, there would be a day trip by flying. You'd leave Aswan, fly out there, tour the temple, and fly back that same night. That's wasn't an option for us. And, without the time to drive out there, we did run into a fellow travel advisor at the hotel in Aswan who had done it the day before. She said it was a very long drive. You're literally driving through the desert. There's nowhere to stop if you have a problem, but it's one of the most spectacular temples in the world. Okay, I've got about 20 minutes left on my time clock here. From Aswan, the other thing we did was the Temple of Philae, which is like Abu Simbel, one of the temples that was moved because of rising waters due to the high dam. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful temple on an island. So we took a little boat ride out there. We also saw, obviously, the high dam, and we saw the Aswan Dam, which is the original dam, closer into the city. We went to a papyrus institute, and we learned how they make papyrus. And I visited the Nubian Museum. This is around the corner from the Old Cataract Hotel, and it gives you a sense of how people in Nubia live, because they're more African than Middle Eastern. And we actually started to see that just in the culture and the people that we started to see in Aswan. Egyptians are, I think, I don't want to be unpolitically correct here, but Egyptians are more Arab looking. Nubians are much more African looking. You start to see that it's just much more African. I don't know how to describe it without being very generalized, and potentially offensive, but you do see a difference in the people. You see a difference in the dress. They dress a lot more traditionally in those long robes, but you start to see more patterns in that. And they live differently too. So the Nubian Museum is a wonderful example of that side of Egypt, that southern part of Egypt, or what they call Upper Egypt, because it's closer to the source of the Nile. But it also has a fascinating exhibit on how UNESCO moved the Abu Simbel temple. I mean, they completely piece by piece dismantled this temple and moved it further inland. It still overlooks the Lake Nasser, but it's inland and it's not going to be damaged. They did the same thing with the Temple of Philae. They moved it block by block. And I read an article earlier that said that by UNESCO working and in multiple countries working to move the Temple of Abu Simbel, it actually led to some of UNESCO's initiatives in saving places like Angkor Wat and Venice and other UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So it's really fascinating. I definitely, Abu Simbel's on the list for when I go back to Egypt, because the story behind it, the modern story behind it, really interests me. So I went to the Nubian Museum. That was fascinating. And then we flew back to Cairo. My fellow travel advisors left me that night, and I was up early the next morning to do ancient Giza, Dashur, Saqqara, all of that. Dashur is about 25 minutes south, or 25 miles south of Cairo, but it takes about an hour to get there. Again, you're on these small roads, lots of traffic, lots of cows, and you're really going through villages at that point. You're kind of traveling along a canal, and then you get out to Dashur. Saqqara is the site of the stepped pyramid, which was one of the first pyramids, the first attempt at a pyramid. It's very stepped. The pyramids at Dashur are the first attempts at smooth-sided pyramids, which is what we see up at Giza. So Dashur is farther south, and just with traffic, it's the logical place to start that day. So you'll actually, when you're doing this, you'll do Dashur first. You'll go back to Saqqara, which is the earlier pyramid, and then you'll end with the great examples at Giza. I think there are some Netflix shows on right now about ancient Egypt. I think Saqqara is one of them. And then a friend of mine recommended a different one that she found a couple weeks ago, that wasn't just about Saqqara, but was more a documentary about Egypt and the temples and everything itself. So they have recently found, while we were in Egypt, a ton of mummies at Saqqara. They've uncovered a lot. Wasn't able to see it, but did see the ongoing excavations. I also saw excavations going on in the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. And they're in the process of moving a lot of the artifacts out of the old Egyptian museum to the new Egyptian museum. There are 2 new museums in Cairo. All of them are sort of in the process of being moved about and things going from here to there. So when it comes to the museums and what I actually saw, I'm not actually sure I saw everything that I could see. But we saw a lot. I will say that. We saw a lot. So Dashur and Saqqara, the pyramids there, well, you can, first of all, you can go inside them, and I did. It was fascinating. Again, at these places that early in the morning, I was the only person there. When I walked into the pyramid, my very first pyramid, when I walked into my very first pyramid ever, it was literally just me. To get into that pyramid, you walk up steps that they've constructed, and you actually enter probably 20 feet off of ground level, and you go down. And then you come to a place where you can stand up, because you can't stand up when you're going down. It's not like walking downstairs. It's about 3 feet, and you have to duck and sort of fit yourself into this little box. But then you stand up, and then you start going up again. So at the top of my very first pyramid ever, I am in the top of this pyramid. There's not a single other person around. The watchman didn't come in with me. My guide didn't come in with me. It's literally just me and about 300 bats. So if you are terrified of flying mammals or have a bad back, going into the pyramids, not for you. However, it's it's an incredible experience, but I will say that if you didn't go into a pyramid, I think you would still have this most wondrous, amazing sense of wonder there, because you're at the pyramids. You can walk around them. You can see the mortuary temples. You can, you can go and you can touch them. You can climb up a couple steps on them. Up until a couple decades ago, people were taking picnics up onto the pyramids and sitting on the stones. And there's no fencing around these pyramids. You probably would be yelled at today if you did it, but you can go and you can touch anything. I'm used to the sites in Greece, for example, the Parthenon. I mean, you can't get anywhere near the Parthenon. You're 30, 40 feet away from the Parthenon. You can't touch anything. We could walk through and just run our hands over the hieroglyphs. It was, I've never been to a place like it. It was absolutely amazing. Again, you've got the two pyramids there at Dashur. You've got Memphis, which was one of the capitals. There's not a lot at Memphis. There's some colossal statues there. There's a very small Sphinx there. It's an important site, but there's not a whole lot to see. Saqqara, of course, you have the Sept Pyramid. You have all sorts of other excavations and going on. There's several tombs there that you can go into. But then, of course, Giza is the highlight, right? It is on the edge of the city. It is, you can see all of Cairo from there. If you're standing up on the plateau at the Giza pyramids, you can see across to the Citadel. From the Citadel, you can see the pyramids. And you have the full city and the valley in between. There were a lot of people, mostly locals, who were coming on to the plateau itself. They were not in the pyramid. Again, I was in the pyramid practically alone. There was another family in there with me, and they didn't go to the Queen and King's chamber at the very top. It was literally just me. Again, a lot of people outside. We had lunch across at a new lounge that is constructed. It's very new. It overlooks this beautiful panorama of the pyramids, and they have traditional Egyptian food. And then, because this was a fam trip, I also had the chance to go out and see the new visitor center and the new entry for the pyramids. It's on the other side from the original entrance, and it's right now your driver can actually get you up on what you walk through with your guide, and you go up to the plateau, but your driver can also go in, and there's a road because it's very spread out. Right now your driver can go up and do this with you. When this new visitor center opens, there will be a parking lot for your driver, your van, your bus, whatever, and a place for your driver to go and wait for you. You will come in through this visitor center. There'll be some displays and conference space and presentation space. And then you'll go out and you'll board a hop-on, hop-off bus. And this will take you through, there'll be 5 stops for you to get on and get off the bus. Groups can do this together. A large group, say a river cruise, could charter one of those buses. And actually VIP clients can have a small bus or a private car still within the complex itself. So it wouldn't be your driver, but it would be, your car for that purpose. Okay, 7 minutes. I'm gonna make this really quick. The following day, I did the medieval Cairo. That's going to be the Coptic era. We saw the Hanging Church, the Church of St. Sergius and Bacchus, which is built on the cave that the Mary, Joseph, and Jesus hid in when they on their flight out of wherever they fled from, hiding from the Romans. I'm really not good with that era of history. And then we did the mosques and the Citadel. And again, this is so, we think of Giza. Giza is the West Bank. That's the pyramids. So the Citadel is on the Eastern Desert, and it is the edge of the eastern side of Cairo. This is the mosque of Muhammad Ali. Just below it are two other mosques, and the bazaar is also right there. I'd actually done the bazaar the night before with a different guide. I didn't get to spend as much time in the bazaar as I wanted to. This is a great place for shopping, for souvenir shopping. And the other ladies in my group did some shopping there. I just didn't feel that I had the time to do it because we'd had dinner and we'd been walking around, and we were on our way back to the van when we went through the bazaar. But everything looked fantastic, and the guides all know the vendors there because they are in there regularly. So after the Citadel and the mosques, that was the end of my itinerary. I went out to dinner with one of the Big Five representatives in Egypt, but just into a very local residential area. And then I went back to the hotel and got my bags and went to the airport. So, I mean, absolutely incredible trip. I have 5 minutes. Are there any questions at all? I could keep talking, but I want to make sure I answer any questions. I haven't seen any come in. I've had a few text messages come through from people though. I'll read those later. Okay, so I'll keep talking, and if there's any questions, I'll jump on them. Yeah, one of the things that came up a lot with us is how amazing it was to have everything to ourselves, but how sad it was too. You know, Egypt hasn't, great report, tell me that COVID should not keep us. Yes, absolutely. If you are willing to take the COVID tests and wear the mask and do the, and follow the rules, and you're comfortable doing that, then this is a great time to travel. Everyone in the bazaar was asking my guide when are the tourists coming back, because they saw her, they know she's a guide. They said, when are people coming back? Everyone who talked to us, they first of all asked us where we were from. We said the US. Everyone, oh, US is number one. US is number one. Come back, bring your friends. They were so welcoming. They were just over the moon to see us. You know, I mentioned at Luxor when we walked through the market, the people were there trying to get us to buy stuff. You know, in a normal year, there'd be river cruises, there'd be tourists, there'd be, 4,000 people a day walking through this small little market and buying a Pepsi, a Coke, a pair of, linen pant, like comfy linen pants, or a traditional shirt, or a piece of alabaster. I bought this from an alabaster store, but I bought this little alabaster obelisk. You can't see it because of this light, but it has hieroglyphics carved on it, and it's alabaster. So, there'd be thousands of people coming through in a normal tourism year to buy these things. And we might have been the only people that they saw. So we didn't throw our money around nilly-willy, but we know from a travel perspective, from a tourist perspective, my God, amazing to be by yourself. From an advisor, from an industry perspective, oh my gosh, I want to send people, I want to tell everybody to go to Egypt, because you will have the experience that I had of being, you will have the same experience that I had. You'll be by yourself at the pyramid. Somebody on this call is going to Egypt in a couple of weeks, and I'm so jealous. I want to get in her bag and go back because it's it's absolutely stunning. But it's so sad to see that these people they're hardly able to support their family because there's no tourism. So that was one of my goals in going, was to say, look, it's safe to go. There's a lot of people out there. Egypt has very low COVID cases right now. So it is, I would say, very safe. We wore our masks everywhere, except when we were the only people in the tomb or the temple. When we were outside walking through the bazaar, I did wear it just because there were a lot of people around me. And I wore it in the Egyptian Museum and the Nubian Museum. But outside of the temples, we took them off. We did wear them on our bus. And I said I was going to mention our security officer, police officer that was with us. Every American traveler that goes through a tour operator has a police officer who's basically given to you for the duration of your trip by the Egyptian Tourist Board. It didn't seem like Canadians had them. A lot of Europeans didn't have them, but it's something that the US negotiated with Egypt that, hey, when our travelers, when our citizens come to Egypt, you're going to give them a police officer. We didn't have the same police officer the entire time. We had one in Luxor and a different one in Aswan, and I had two different ones in Cairo. But they were all very nice. They were all just kind of in the background. If I stopped to take a picture and I was the last person in the group, they would kind of wait behind me. And then nobody ever pushed me along. They didn't try to get me to keep moving, but they would watch to make sure that you weren't left behind. Okay. Oh, if I want to go, do you help with COVID stuff? I will give information on the COVID restrictions for travelers. This will be in the form of the US Embassy page, tourism board information from that country, and I will provide information in terms of potential labs that might work, urgent cares that may give them to you. But in the end, I do say it's the traveler's responsibility to verify that information, because it's possible that it's changed since I gave it to you. And also, you know where you live best, and you know the urgent cares in that area and potentially a private lab. So in the end, it's the traveler's responsibility, but I will be as helpful as possible in terms of giving you the information that you can go and then research and verify on your own. Really enjoyed the music overlaid. Go anywhere what I heard. Okay, on my night in the bazaar with Manal, one of the guides with Big Five, we went to a restaurant where they were playing traditional Egyptian music. And that music that I found in my, it was on the video at the very beginning, was the closest I could find in Apple's iMovie to what I had heard at that restaurant. We had a boat ride in Aswan, in Aswan, where the Nubian boatmen did play a song and sing for us, which was very cool. And we had a couple boys on paddle boards come up to us while we were on our sailboat, and they started singing the Macarena, which I don't think is traditional Egyptian music. However, it was very cool and it was very cute. But we had the Nubian music on the boat on the Nile down in Aswan, and then in the bazaar at the restaurant. Otherwise, music-wise, at the restaurants and the bars that I did go to and the hotels, they were playing, background music, or there'd be top 40, US, UK stuff. So, okay, I have officially talked for an hour, and I hope I gave you all the information. I went through all of my notes, so I think I did, and I really appreciate you all spending this hour with me. Um, if there aren't any other questions, I will go ahead and end this. You know, you can always email me. I'll be sending a follow up with this recording as well. And again, there were a few people that didn't get the chance to jump on that liked the recording. So I'll send that out. And again, any questions, you know where to find me. So thank you very much.